Welcome to Season 3 of the Charity Matters podcast. I'm Heidi Johnson, lifelong helper, nonprofit founder, and your host. I've been interviewing the helpers for a decade with my blog, and I'm so grateful to now be sharing these inspiring conversations on our podcast. Join me as we learn the challenges and stories of innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern-day heroes who set out to solve the problems of humanity. Have you ever seen a homeless person on the street and walked by because you didn't know what to do or say? Today's guest, Kevin Adler, is going to enlighten all of us as he shares his inspirational journey of reuniting the homeless with their families through his work as the founder of the nonprofit Miracle Messages. We are so excited to have Kevin Adler here today of Miracle Messages. Kevin is an amazing nonprofit founder, a TED Talk speaker with millions of downloads, and an all-around amazing human who is doing really incredible work with the homeless community. So welcome, Kevin. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Heidi. It's really good to meet you and to be with you.
We're so excited. Well, I know what you guys do. And when I heard the name of your nonprofit, I was like, okay, that's a really unusual name for a nonprofit. And I have interviewed hundreds of nonprofit founders. So tell me and tell all of us a little bit about what Miracle Messages does.
Absolutely. And I'll even weave in the origin of the name, if that sounds good.
Please. I would love that because I'm intrigued.
Okay. Well, you gotta hold tight for a second. It's coming.
Okay. So, I'm buckling up.
My story with this work begins really with my own family. I had an uncle who was very beloved to me. He was my favorite uncle, remembered every birthday, guest of honor at Thanksgiving, Christmas. But Uncle Mark was his name. He also suffered from schizophrenia, and he lived on and off the streets of Santa Cruz for 30 years. One day I was in college at the time. I got a phone call from my dad. Tears, in his voice, you could just hear it wavering. And he had told me that Uncle Mark was found deceased at a halfway house at the age of 50. And, I was really shaken by this for a couple reasons. It was right at a moment, I was 19 at the time. I had never thought about the life that Mark lived when he wasn't at our Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner table. I sometimes accompanied my dad to the Greyhound station and dropped him off, and I would go to Santa Cruz, and I know he'd call, sometimes collect back in those days, and ask for,
back in the day when you could do that.
Yeah. But since he just remembered every birthday, I always had a card in the mail. I never thought about the life he was living on the streets.
Right.
And it wasn't until years later that I was in San Francisco and, living and working in the city. And I just found myself walking by our neighbors experiencing homelessness. And I stopped and I said, gosh, everyone I'm walking by, that's someone's son or daughter, brother or sister. That's someone's beloved uncle. And what are the stories, right? So it got me thinking, what would it look like to help neighbors experiencing homelessness, people like my Uncle Mark, maybe share their stories, the stories that I didn't know. I wasn't trying to solve a problem, create an organization. But I started a side project, a storytelling project called Homeless GoPro, where for 1 year, I invited 24 individuals experiencing homelessness to wear wearable cameras around their chests and narrate their experience of what life is like. And I got the footage back and was just shocked by what I heard and saw. And one quote really stood out. It was, I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and friends.
Oh.
And that angle was, so that late, long story short. So I heard that, ended up deciding to take a walk down Market Street, downtown San Francisco, go up to everyone I saw who was experiencing homelessness and say, do you have any loved ones you'd like to reconnect with? And that's how I met a man named Jeffrey. He told me he hadn't seen his family in 22 years. He recorded a video to his niece and his nephew, his sister, his dad. And I went home and I got on Facebook and found a Facebook group connected to his hometown. So I posted the video there. And within 1 hour, no joke, Heidi, 1 hour, that video got shared hundreds of times. It made the local news that night as the leading story. Classmates started commenting, hey, I went to high school with Jeffrey. I work in construction. Does he need a job? I work at the congressman's office. Does he need health care? And in the first 20 minutes of the post, his sister got tagged. We got on the phone the next day, and it turned out that Jeffrey had been a missing person for 12 years.
I mean, I watched this video on your website of some people being reunited, and I mean, get the Kleenex. We take our families for granted. Oftentimes, sometimes our families cause us a little stress. Sometimes we're a little overwhelmed by our family, or someone didn't take out the trash, or whatever happens. But when you think about being without family, without support, which is something that we can't even get our heads around, and the thought that you connected all of these dots. I mean, your Uncle Mark left you this gift, this legacy, and obviously this incredible compassion. I love that how you refer to my neighbors that are experiencing homelessness. Just that difference. Like, this is my neighbor. They sleep outside in front of my house or around the corner. This is my neighbor. I mean, just that mental shift is something that is just going to stay with me. But just that is so powerful.
Well, it's been hard earned for myself, Heidi, because the first time I met a person who was unhoused for the storytelling project, we met in broad daylight, and it was through a mutual friend, and they were open to wearing the camera around their chest. And with podcasts, so folks can't see what I'm doing, I was holding my keys in my pocket in my hands as a weapon, because I was that nervous that someone could jump at me. And that's where I started. I'm a tall, able-bodied man who generally does not feel uncomfortable in new situations like that. And so I start with that because I realized that I was seeing my unhoused neighbors not as people to be loved, but as problems to be solved.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think that's how a lot of people look at it.
Yeah,
right.
And that was the switch. I needed to not see people as problems to be solved, but see people as people to be loved. Because when you love people, problems get solved.
Right. And since this is a podcast and no one can see Kevin's t-shirt, but it says everyone is someone's somebody. And every time I do see someone, I think, and I see a lot more homeless men than I do women. And I'm the mother of 3 sons. And I always think this is someone's son. This is someone's child. I do think that. I do think that all the time. But I think, like your initial reactions, and like a lot of us, we don't know what to do. The homeless, I think there's so many emotions that homelessness evokes in us: frustration, sadness, fear, anger. I mean, it triggers so many things that you it's almost like a tsunami of emotion that hits you. And then because the tsunami's so big, you just shut down. You say, I need to keep going. It's a little bit, I think, I know that I've made a number of attempts over the years, and some have gone well and some have not. And I've gotten afraid. I have to admit it. I've been afraid.
I appreciate, hey, it's a safe space here. Let's talk about these things, because it's a very common experience, and many folks who are listening, everyone cares at some level about the issue of homelessness. We know this isn't right. And, you don't need to look further
100%.
than seeing kids. When I was doing the camera thing, you'd see children walk by. Every single kid looks back, drags on their mom or dad's. Why is that man on switch? Stares, points. Half the time, the parent kind of drags them away. No, that's impolite. That's not safe. Right. The other half the time, they almost let the child guide to the person, and it's almost, who's going to grow up to be a more trusting adult? It's for me, this concept of what we come to call relational poverty is a form of poverty that our unhoused neighbors experience. And it's very foreign to many of us. We maybe glimpsed it in our lives, times of great loneliness, isolation, certainly over the last 1.5, 2 years. Absolutely. In the pandemic. But as one of our unhoused neighbors said, you don't need to teach me about social distancing. That's my life already. So, for me, the starting point was this: Jeffrey reconnected with his family in short order. I asked his sister, Jennifer, here's this thing that seems to be bigger than just Jeffrey and your relationship, there seems there might be others who are experiencing this issue. What should we call this initiative? And what she suggested, she said, well, we're in this small town, Montoursville, and people have referred to it, the story, as the miracle of Montoursville, of him reconnecting. And she's like, I got this message, and it was a Christmas message because it was right before Christmas. Maybe it's called the miracle message. And I said, there you go.
Oh my God, so I got the chills. You just gave me the chills. That's so good.
That's the name. And the vision from day one has always been twofold, that no one goes through homelessness alone, and no one should feel helpless on this issue. To your point, that it's so easy to feel like, what do you do? We want to create ways for everyday people, housed residents, unhoused residents, to come together as neighbors to resolve homelessness in our time.
So what year did you start Miracle Messages?
Yeah, so we started Miracle Messages in December 2014. So we just celebrated our 7th year anniversary.
I mean, that's so amazing to me. I can't even believe that. Well, so what was it that you wanted to be when you grew up? Because I'm taking a little gander that it wasn't a nonprofit founder.
It wasn't. I didn't know what that was. So it definitely wasn't that. Initially, really, really young, I wanted to be a basketball player, but I stopped growing at 6'2" instead of 6'7". And then
not bad. You're close.
Bad. I thought about acting as well. I love acting, and for me, it was the ability to tell a story and to make people feel something about a person or a situation, a subject that they, in an hour and a half, can change their perspective on.
Oh my God, how cool that you are doing that for sure every day. Wow, I love that.
Yeah, so there's it's kind of like you start with one thing and then you kind of move.
Right.
And so, and then having a longstanding interest other than that in social entrepreneurship and in politics and policy, and that continues.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I think it's so fascinating because there's always this unexpected path that leads us to this work, right? Because this work is not easy, and starting any business, by the way, isn't easy. And I think people don't always realize when you are a social entrepreneur or nonprofit founder, whatever you want to call it, you are an entrepreneur. You're starting a business with nothing, and you're relying on the kindness of others to make your business run, which is not always the best and easiest business model. So tell me about some of the challenges you've had, especially in the early days of starting Miracle Messages.
Absolutely. Well, it's always been a privilege to do this work, but it has not been without challenges. And, just even, we talk about relational poverty. For me, having the support system that I have of, rock bottom, never getting so low because I could always go live with my dad if I needed to, or I have so many friends that, could open doors for me. But there was a point that I got down to $600 in my savings account doing this work in San Francisco. And it wasn't it
doesn't go very far in San Francisco.
Not a sustainable thing. But, I guess I have, I'm a person of faith, and I prayed at times. The first prayer is, please let someone else take this and run with it and steal the idea, because I don't know if I'm up for it. Like, I feel like maybe I'm an imposter.
Because you knew it was a good one. You knew it was a good enough idea. It needed to be done, and it needed to be stolen.
But I don't think I was the one to do it. And I was like, other people, maybe they care more about homelessness than I do. I questioned whether it's like, quote unquote, my issue. But I realized it wasn't homelessness that I cared about. It was my belief in the intrinsic value of each person and the interconnectedness of us all. And it just so happens that our unhoused neighbors are seen, and today in 21st century San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm based, they are seen as less than. They're not seen as intrinsically valuable. And I'm not just talking about like a right-wing critique. There is a lot of progressive paternalism in the city by the bay.
I don't think it's political. I mean, yes, there is a political side to homelessness, but that I don't think when a person walks by their political right, left, or whatever has anything to do with their anything. It doesn't even register.
Maybe insofar as, I think I've seen some folks, some more liberal circles say, well, it's mental health and alcohol and addiction, and that's, sad and they need support. And then on the more right wing would be like, well, they need to get a job or they made bad life choices, individual failing. But in either case, it doesn't really evaluate the fact that first there's mental health issues, substance abuse issues with house people, right? We all face that.
Right.
We're talking about broken systems or criminal justice system, housing affordability, education, foster care youth.
Foster care is a huge
We talk about, if a third of kids, I think by the age of like 24, 26, who go through the foster care system experience homelessness, you're not going to look me in the eye and say that kid did something wrong. They're just part of a system that's broken. So it's the broken systems.
Forgive me for interrupting you, but I interviewed a really interesting nonprofit yesterday called Foster the Mind in Texas that deals with mental health of foster children. And the CDC said in 2015 that the cost of mental health for children, and it was basically aimed at the foster system, is over $2 trillion annually. And that foster care children, it turns out, have 2 times the PTSD that our veterans do. Wow. So think if you're aging out of the foster care system and now you have nowhere to go, and the trauma you've already been through with being abandoned or not having a family, and then you end up in the homeless track, which often case happens, youth homelessness. I mean, it's just so heart-wrenching. Forgive me for interrupting, but I had to share.
No, it was very
top of mind.
One of the guiding insights that I've heard for my work comes out of the foster care youth space. And I can't remember the founder or the CEO who said this, but the quote was something like, I can tell you if you're looking at one question on how well a child does going through the foster care system, I can tell you who's going to do well, who doesn't do well based on one question, which is, did that kid have someone who went to bed at night and woke up in the morning thinking of their well-being, who was not a government caseworker?
Wow.
And if they had that one person who, and it makes sense because that's what we think of for our own kids, our own family. It's you're constantly there, top of mind. And so I just don't know at what age we age out of the need to feel loved and to feel belonging and to feel supported.
Never. Well, I think of the challenges because you have 3, kind of pillars that you guys focus on at Miracle Messages. You're focusing on reuniting, just creating messages and connecting people with their lost loved ones. So that in itself is should be an incredible TV show. I mean, just what you have to do, the super sleuth, the behind the scenes, everything you have to do to reunite 2 people is that in itself. I can't even imagine the kind of challenge that is. Then you're doing a phone buddy system and you're trying to, give some sort of rent subsidies and giving them a hand up to just get going. So talk to me about just the logistical pieces of all of that. There's a lot there.
A lot there. You summarized
all fantastic, by the way, but a lot.
Thank you. You summarized it well. And we definitely we do a lot, but we're also pretty laser focused on what we can do and what we can't do. And for us, it's we're not trying to be a silver bullet on this issue. I don't think there is one.
Yeah, I don't think. I wish there. I wish there was. Yeah.
Yeah, and some organizations they grow pretty big, trying to become a little bit of something for everyone.
Right.
For us, we are laser focused on relational poverty and just financial security, and so rebuilding social support systems and financial security. Logistically, 90% of what we do can be done pretty much virtually, remotely at scale. We have volunteer digital detectives. So it's not just me wandering the streets posting on social media. We have trained volunteers. Anyone who's listening can sign up to be a volunteer with Miracle Messages and make phone calls, write letters to locate loved ones, deliver messages, reunite families. So that's, except we have the phone buddy program. People can volunteer as phone buddies. The challenge that we have is 90% of what we do is remote, virtual, at scale. The last 10%, the last mile of signing people up for our programs and enrolling them, that's really freaking hard for us. Right. So what we've started to do is we've been hiring general managers to offer our services in different communities around the country. So we right now have SF, South Florida, Los Angeles is coming on board in the next couple of weeks. And then
we need you. Come quick.
Yeah,
come quick.
We're coming.
We're coming. Kevin.
But one person, there's no way they can serve at Los Angeles County, right? So that's where then it comes to like partner referrals. We've set up a phone number, a hotline, 1-800-MISS-YOU. So anyone who wants to refer someone can call 1-800-MISSYOU or our website, 1-800-MISSYOU.org. In either a paper form, online form, or by calling our hotline, can refer an unhoused individual to our services, either the buddy program, phone buddy program, or the digital detective work.
That's amazing. So I can only imagine, I think I know the answer to this question, but I have to ask it anyways, because I want to hear another story and can try not to get weepy. But, when I ask people what fuels them to keep doing this work, because the challenges are big. The bucket, I always say the bucket's heavy. We still have to come home and go to the grocery store. We still have to do our own laundry. But when we go to bed at night, we're not thinking about, did we make, 25 extra pencils in the pencil factory to sell? We're thinking about the people whose backs rely on us. I mean, there's actually human beings that, in your case, aren't going to be connected with a loved one or might not have a place to sleep that night. And it's not on you, but somehow when the buck stops with the founder, it feels that way. I think it feels that way for a lot of us. And we feel like we can't do enough. We can't help enough. We can't give enough. So when it's hard like that, what fuels you? What are those moments that you are like, oh, I am so going on? What are those moments? And I can only guess, but I'm just.
It's a wonderful question, Heidi. And we should do this more often. It's fun to talk to you about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm game.
I had to come to a realization a few years ago that I could not make myself the first casualty of a good cause.
Yep.
And
good for you. Bravo.
And I was en route to doing that. And it's coming from a place of relative stability and privilege, but when I was just working nonstop, no stopping time, nights, weekends, who cares? When I didn't have much of a social life, when I was, on a solopreneurship journey, God bless anyone who's still doing a venture by themselves. I needed people. I needed a team. I felt isolated and lonely.
Right.
And so for me, the beginning of being able to sustain this work in the tough times is by making sure your own foundation's in order, that you put your oxygen mask on. And if you don't do that, you can't be of service to others. And, I'm a big fan of the Enneagram. If you're familiar with personality test, the Enneagram.
Yes. I think I'm a 3.
You're a 3. Okay. So I'm a 2.
Okay.
So the two's the helper. So, you want to give, you're supporting, but the shadow side, yeah, it could be the leader, but the shadow side of the 2 is there's at the underlying, you're giving to others all the time. You actually have some pretty significant needs as well, but you're almost expecting others to meet those needs without necessarily expressing them yourself. So it's not, it becomes, you're working, but it's not a gift freely given. It's expectant. You want something in return, and you get resentful when things aren't, going your way.
Interesting.
So I just had to really, I found love in the middle of the pandemic, and one question, thank you. One question my partner always asks me that I need to hear is like, what do you need? What do you want? How are you feeling? What's your thoughts on this? Because it's harder for me to check in on myself with that.
Right.
So, start with that.
I think that's really super common. Nonprofit founders, we give until we're empty and we don't think to refuel the tank. We all go through it. And I think the other thing that happens is when we have a moment when we realize we can't help everyone. And it's a horrible moment. It's a horrible moment when the resources aren't there, the money isn't there, the time is whatever it is. And it's a horrible moment, but you just have to realize you're doing the best you can do and move forward. But I have to, I always say that like we get paid in different ways. We certainly don't get into this work for the money, that is for sure. But we get paid in incredible ways. And in watching the videos, and again, anyone listening, you need to go on miraclemessages.org to watch some of these reunited videos, because to me, I couldn't emotionally watch them all day because it's so beautiful. It's like a Hallmark movie on steroids. I don't even know. It's just so powerful to see, like that father and son have been 19 years since they're reunited. To me, that are those the kind of paydays that you're like, oh my gosh, we did this today. Here's the story. Is that what just says, okay, like I got to do more of this. I've got to do this better, faster, stronger, or whatever.
It started that way for me for sure, because I was doing all the reunions kind of, with a very small cast of characters.
Right.
As we've grown, we now have hundreds of people who've helped record messages and do digital detective work. So for me, it's as much, a degree removed from the direct services on a day-to-day basis, but hearing the stories of our volunteers and why they commit their time, why they donate, why they show up, and we have friends right now, volunteers who are in the buddy program who have, cancer diagnoses and serious illnesses. And their friends may not even know it. And, it's a whole conversation on sharing it or not sharing it, but they just are like, yeah, I'm dealing with this thing, but I get so much joy and gratitude just being able to give and be there for someone else. We can all envision like bank accounts with a couple more zeros at the end of it. But once you're at a certain, baseline level, which everyone needs in this country, everyone should have, the ability to get stable housing and healthcare and education and, the basics. But once you have that, like, what do you need? What else are you really lacking? I mean, you need that many more square feet in your house or car that's this who cares, So just being able to see the joy of doing good with the time that you have on this earth and helping others unleash the good that's within their hearts that they just don't know how to share. That's really what drives me.
That is beautiful. And you said two of my favorite words, because I say this all the time: you cannot have joy without gratitude. And I think when we even realize, and we go to bed at night and we say, oh my gosh, thank you for this, whatever you're thanking, if it's your God or wherever it is that you feel gratitude to, but for your home, for your pillow, for your bed, for a roof, when you stop and realize what you have, everything shifts. And it just changes everything in your life. And it also puts you in a better place to be able to give when you realize how much you really have. So I have to ask this question. It's something that I have this love-hate relationship with the word impact, because you and I are held accountable to our impact for grants and for donors and all sorts of people that want to know what their return on investment, their ROI is. And super respectable if you're going to be giving and you want to know that you're betting on the right horse. I completely understand that. But how do you measure the impact of a father and a son being reunited after 19 years? I mean, how do you measure someone who's been on the streets who now has a home? How do you measure someone who has a friend that calls them every week to check in on them, that cares about them? Those are, to me, immeasurable things. And the word impact doesn't even come close to whatever those moments are. So when I ask you what your impact is, I'm sure you can give me statistics, which I'd love to hear too, but what else do you think it is?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the context before the question. Our core value at Miracle Messages is to meet people where they're at. And initially we interpreted that, I think actually narrowly, we interpreted that for just our neighbors experiencing homelessness. And then we realized, well, we need to actually meet the families where they're at, because some of them don't want to reconnect. and challenges. We get bridges have been burned. And then it was, well, let's meet our volunteers where they're at, because they're really doing hard work. And then over time, it's become, well, funders, donors, supporters, high net worth individuals, media outlets that want to tell this story. We may roll our eyes and get annoyed at kind of their thought process and how questions they're asking, but that's the world they're living in, and I've learned just to
I hope you're not rolling your eyes at me because your camera's off and I can't tell.
No, not at all. I'll put it back on for a second. No, I'm empathizing. So I totally agree that all too often in the nonprofit sector, impact is pretty narrowly construed. And it's often, let's just be super honest, it comes down to dollars and cents, like is $1 here the most efficient use? And hey, I love some of the ideas of effective altruism. But I also think there's a place for a more holistic view of impact. With our work, impact is a person who's experiencing homelessness potentially getting off the streets, which about 20% of the reunions lead to housing. Impact involves the cost savings that generates when it costs us, thousands of dollars compared to cities spending between $40,000 to $60,000 per unhoused person per year to maintain them on the streets for 1 year.
Interesting.
And we're talking about the cost savings there. Impact can be measured in the lives and the perspectives of the volunteers who say, I never knew I could do anything on the issue of homelessness. I felt very low sense of personal efficacy in making an impact, but now I feel empowered and now I feel, compelled. And impact can also be measured in the fact that we've received, over 100 million views on our videos on Facebook. We've had over 1 million shares. We've had 700 articles written about us.
Wow.
And it changes, the hearts and minds of folks who, when you see a video about a person experiencing homelessness, reconnecting a loved one, or being in a phone buddy program, or getting $500 a month for 6 months and using that money better than we could have used it for them. Then it changes your perspective. So, I think we're very excited about our growth plans in 2022. We're going to be expanding in Los Angeles to do a randomized control trial of basic income plus social support for people experiencing homelessness in LA County. So, in a nutshell, we'll be giving out like $750 a month for 12 months to dozens of people who are unhoused, enroll them in our phone buddy program, and then also simultaneously have a group that's just getting the phone buddy program service, not the direct cash. And then another group that's going to be more of what's called the waitlist control. And we'll measure those 3 groups over a year period to see how the intervention of basic income plus phone buddy social support compares to just social support compares to not having anything. So, we take impact seriously, but I also think anyone who listens to their unhoused neighbors or our volunteers and has their heart or mind shifted or opened as a result, that's an immeasurable impact that we're very proud of as well.
Immeasurable. Immeasurable. Even the language you've given us today, that's an impact. That's a huge impact. Just changing our focus and our language in some of these things, that's impactful. That's really impactful. You can see why I hate the word. I love it and I hate it. I really have some issues. So as you said, there's no silver bullet. And I know your organization is dealing with pretty big. It's a big one. Homelessness is definitely a big one. But if you could dream any dream for Miracle Messages, any dream, like as big as you could dream, what does that look like? What does that look like for you?
For us, no one goes through homelessness alone. And that, I would love to end that sentence a word early. No one goes through homelessness. I need to dream bigger to know how that's going to be happening in the next few years. I can't see it.
Yeah.
All these, I have been around enough where I see 5-year plans. We're going to have homelessness by this year. Those years have come and gone and the numbers are increasing.
Right.
And it's only getting worse with, rent subsidies being cut, the child tax credit, with the effects of the pandemic. So I don't think we're ending homelessness anytime soon. But what we can do, and a step towards ending homelessness, is making sure every single human being, all 550,000 people who go to bed every night and wake up in the morning homeless without a stable home in this country in 2022, that they have at least one person who they're connected to, either a family member, a friend, social support, that they know they're not going through it alone. And that, to me, is something we are able to envision and realistically achieve through miracle messages, through partners on the ground. And I think giving people money so that they can resolve the issues that are in front of them. People generally have the knowledge and wherewithal of what is best for them and their family, but they just aren't given the agency. They're not afforded the same opportunities that we all expect, in this country. So just giving people the financial support they need to make ends meet, and the social support they need to get through tough times and be celebrated at good times. That's really what we're committed to at Miracle Messages.
I think that is a beautiful dream, because I think, as you mentioned earlier, we all felt isolated in this last year and a half. We all felt disconnected from our pods and our people. And even if we had family, or everyone was cut off in some way from people that they loved and cared about. So if ever there was a time in the world that we can be empathetic and understand, even in the tiniest fraction, not even what the isolation that homeless are experiencing, it's now. And so when you just think about how we felt, and it's nothing compared to what hundreds of thousands of people, and especially, gosh, in LA, it's heartbreaking. So do you have a phrase or a motto that you live by besides the one on your t-shirt, that everybody is somebody, which I love that one. It's a great one. If that's it, that's okay. But if you happen to have one, just curious.
I have my, I don't know if this is going to get a little macabre here, but I almost have my dream epitaph already written for what would be on my gravesite someday, hopefully many, many decades in the future.
That's the first answer I've ever gotten that starts like that. So,
right. It goes deep
right,
real quick. Hopefully not.
Bring it on.
Not 6 feet deep, but it goes deep.
No, let's hope not. You have a lot of work to do, my friend.
A lot of work to do. A lot of, but in addition to father and son and partner and friend and like that. For me, the thing I tried to live by is, he never learned the word stranger and tried to live accordingly. Oh. And that's to me it. I have a deep love for people. I want people to succeed. I want to see people for who they are. It's not a perfect quality. Sometimes it makes me hold myself and others to high expectations, and I have to learn to be more gentle, because I want people, including myself, to do well, to thrive. But I have learned to love and trust people at a really deep, authentic level. And that has given me a level of permission to do this work that I don't think I would have had otherwise. Because an unhoused neighbor, they know what your intention is once you start talking. It may be takes a moment, and you got to be mindful about the time of day, and are you walking into their home and bothering them. But if you look them in the eye and you say, "How are you? I saw you here. I just felt compelled to say hi. I wanted to check in. My name's Kevin. I had an uncle who was homeless for 30 years. And, I started this group called Miracle Messages. We help people reconnect to loved ones or get matched with a phone buddy. I just felt compelled to share that with you, and say hi. It doesn't have to be the perfect words, but I think we can understand authenticity. So that for me is just trying to always see my never learning the word stranger, seeing everyone as a friend or kinfolk, and trying to treat them that way.
I love that. I definitely am cut from that cloth. I'm the person that collects like strangers on the plane and like brings them home for dinner. Like I'm kind of that person. I had an aunt that was like that, and it's like a thing, but I love that. But I think that motto is beautiful. That's fantastic.
Doesn't it open up the world? Like it just makes it so less closed off and exciting and, thrilling, because then, and, look, I cannot imagine folks who have gone through horrific traumas at the hands of other people and being able to retain that same openness. Like, my gosh, right. God bless anyone who has half the openness that I've been able to build, but has experienced something that has caused them, rightfully so, to close off, to keep a hands up. But I truly believe that 99% of people that I've ever met just want to do good, are well-intentioned, and we just don't know how to connect with each other anymore as people. And I think a starting point is just to give people the love and, kindness that they deserve and that they want to reciprocate. It really brings people out of their shell in a really exciting way. So I can imagine your dinner parties after coming back on a flight would be super fun, and I want to be invited too.
You're always welcome, even if I don't run into you on a plane. Everyone's always welcome. We're a more the merrier kind of crowd. That's the kind of way we roll around here. Everyone is welcome. Everyone is always welcome. Well, I can't even imagine. I mean, you've already shared such incredible wisdom with us, but 8 years doing this work, and you already, I think, were maybe an old soul to begin with a little bit, but there's a lot of life lessons in this. And when we are dealing in the work we do in nonprofits, is we're trying to serve humanity. That's what we try to do. We're just trying to help our fellow man in whatever way we can. And that's the work that we do. And there's a lot of, we see the best in humanity and we see the worst. I always say, we have a front row seat, and that is going to be the title of my book. So you can't take it, but that is my title of my book, Front Row Seat to Humanity. Everyone heard it here first.
Love it. Love it.
But we see these things that other people aren't privileged to see, I think, or don't look closely enough. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a little bit of both. And so there's lessons in that. And so share with us some of the lessons that you've learned in these 8 years in doing this incredible work with Miracle Messages.
Well, it's interesting to just kind of build off what you're saying, connected to your question. So there was a study, I believe it was out of Stanford University, where the gist of it was they looked at whether a person exiting a store, like say a department store, JCPenney and Macy's, before we all shopped on Amazon, they'd exit the store, would they engage or not engage with a Salvation Army bell ringer? And would they go through the door where the person was present, or would they circumvent the door and go to another door to try to avoid that contact? And, I forget a little bit about the experiment and the design, but the conclusion was that people actually would often disengage and choose to go to the other door. But if they went through the door, they were much more likely to want to interact. The conclusion was basically, we're protective of our empathy. And we often, and so we often try to look away, don't make the eye contact, don't step up, not because we don't care, but because we're capable of caring so much. And that once it's activated, we are going to feel the need to do something. And we don't know if there's anything we can do, because it's a person who's homeless and I can't house the person. So my thing is we need to get past this really, I think, corrosive sense that pervades a lot of the structural issues we face as a society, that each of us as individuals are helpless to make a difference. I think the path to change begins looking in the mirror, little actions. For us at Miracle Messages, looking and having a conversation, interacting, being able to do the reconnections and the phone buddy thing is great. But I'll never forget the guy who was homeless, slumped over with a cardboard sign, wasn't even holding it up. He was just leaning down, sitting down with the sign over him. I'll never forget it. It said, "At least give me the finger."
Wow. I haven't seen that one. Wow.
Oh, and can you imagine like getting so feeling of disconnectedness, shame,
that you're looking for anyone to give you anything,
literally
even that.
Literally
Wow.
a middle finger, like one of the most offensive things you could do
wow.
to a person. You'd rather have that than
wow.
being ignored,
right?
And being
wow.
people overlooking. So I think we have so much more power by giving people our presence, our attention, our full being. It's the greatest gift we have. It's also the shortest gift, the most finite gift we have.
It is.
So that's my thing. Is just
I think that's a really good lesson. And do you think you've changed in these 8 years, or do you think you're still the same person who loves people and think you're the same person, or do you think that you've changed?
My values are the same, and my kind of what drives me as a person, with my faith, how I look at people. But I think I've grown a lot. I've realized that my story is but one story, and the importance of really hearing other stories and their lived experience, meeting other people where they're at. I've realized how much harder this work can be, but also how it's so important to keep the core foundation in mind, keep the perspective, because it's so easy to get sidetracked into the BS, the comparison game, the funding you've got, that they get the media coverage. So yeah, I think I've grown a ton as a person, but I also think fundamentally I'm still the precocious kid who is just comfortable walking around the neighborhood talking to, my neighbors.
Well, you still are. You're still walking around. And thank you for sharing your story with us and teaching us how to talk to our neighbors, and giving us just such joy and a topic that I think people don't always find joy in. And it's so joyful and so exciting just to see hope and to see connection and to see humanity coming together to help each other. And you've shared all of that with us today. So I'm so grateful for that. Please, please, please tell us how and where to volunteer, to donate, to support you, to help you, because I think really that helpless feeling that we feel is the worst feeling. And you are giving us a way to not feel that. So tell us how we can help you.
Well, I appreciate that. And, for me, the biggest thing someone could do is, you heard my story and maybe you found something that resonated with you, that, hey, that connects to you. I'd personally love to hear from you. So please be in touch, miraclemessages.org/get involved, and just share what resonated with you and connected to you, your work, the life you've lived. But maybe even more than that, there's probably a neighbor experiencing homelessness, where you live or near your school, your place of work, your house, who probably has a fascinating story, maybe even better than the one you just heard from Heidi and I share. So take a moment and go have a conversation. And if you feel uncomfortable by yourself, do it in the daylight, of course, with a friend. Go maybe have a pair of socks or food to give, but just have a conversation, because for me, it begins by just listening, having conversations, getting to know each other as neighbors. That would be, I think, a great first step. And then if folks are wanting to get involved in Miracle Messages, you can volunteer as a digital detective, help locate loved ones and reunite families. You can also be a phone buddy anywhere in the world. We got phone buddies in Chile, Brazil, Germany, Philippines, all having weekly phone calls and text messages with unhoused folks in San Francisco, LA, South Florida. So please sign up at miraclemessages.org/get involved, or feel free to take a look at our website, watch some of our videos, get on our Facebook or social media channels, learn more. And again, I'd love to hear from you about what resonated and the stories that you hear in your community from your neighbors experiencing homelessness.
And listen to Kevin's TED Talk if you haven't listened to that, because you get a little bit more as well from what he just shared today. And it was really inspiring and beautifully done. And you had me completely enraptured. I was hanging on every word, and it was so great. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your beautiful, beautiful work, and kind of reminding us about the best of ourselves, because that's what you've just shown us of who we can be if we're just a little bit kinder and talking to our neighbors and reaching out and connecting and knowing that no one is a stranger. So thank you for that. It's such a gift and really a pleasure to get to know you. So thank you.
Likewise. So nice to be in conversation with you. I look forward to reconnecting and many more conversations to come.
Me too. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I so enjoyed talking to Kevin Adler about what it takes to start a business that truly changes people's lives. I think Kevin's comment about giving people our attention was beyond inspiring and true. To learn more about modern day heroes like Kevin, or if you'd like to reach out to us, visit us at charity-matters.com or connect with us on Instagram at Charity Matters. If you enjoyed our conversation, we would love it if you shared it with your family and friends. Please don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcast. Remember that together we can make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. Charity Matters. See you next time.